Have you ever felt the terrifying clarity of knowing exactly what someone is thinking, their lies, their manipulations, even the darkest corners of their intentions, before they speak a word? Imagine the fear that would grip someone who has spent their life manipulating others when they realize they are being seen completely, with no masks, no illusions. This is the reality of an awakened empath. But here's the part nobody talks about. Most people, even highly intelligent narcissists, underestimate the power of someone who perceives without judgment and acts from a place of profound awareness. Wait until you hear this. The awakened empath is not merely sensitive. They are a living mirror, reflecting the unconscious, the hidden motives, and the shadow projections of everyone around them. Carl Jung warned that such individuals carry a rare energy, one that exposes deception effortlessly and commands attention simply by existing. When a narcissist encounters this, their usual tools of manipulation, gaslighting, guilt-tripping, and emotional exploitation lose their efficacy. Consider a metaphor. Imagine walking into a room where every shadow, every hidden corner is suddenly illuminated. The manipulator thrives in darkness, in blind spots, in the spaces where no one is watching. The awakened empath carries a light that penetrates every hiding place. Suddenly, every move becomes visible, every strategy known. For the first time, the narcissist feels vulnerable. But here's the part nobody talks about. Being an awakened empath isn't just about seeing others. It's about feeling their intentions, understanding their patterns, and recognizing the emotional architecture they've built around themselves. A manipulator may have spent years constructing a facade, but the empath reads between the layers, sensing the subtle shifts, the micro-expressions, the energy that betrays truth. Wait until you hear this. The awakened empath is also dangerous to themselves if untrained. When this level of perception emerges, every lie, every betrayal, every hidden motive in their environment can become a source of emotional overload. Jung described this as psychic overexposure, the phenomenon where excessive awareness of external darkness begins to erode one's internal stability. That is why self-mastery, boundaries, and shadow integration are essential. Consider a story. Elise, a woman with natural empathic abilities, noticed patterns of deceit in a close colleague almost immediately. She saw through flattery, subtle undermining, and staged crises before anyone else caught them. Initially, this insight was overwhelming. She struggled with anger, confusion, and exhaustion. But as she learned to observe without absorbing, to respond strategically rather than reactively, she transformed this awareness into power, protecting herself while subtly guiding others toward accountability. But here's the part nobody talks about. This power is invisible until it is intentionally exercised. The awakened empath doesn't need confrontation to assert influence. Their energy alone can destabilize the manipulator, revealing weakness, insecurity, and desperation without a single word. Wait until you hear this. Step 2 of this phenomenon is the activation of the shadow within others. Jung believed every person carries a shadow, the hidden, often destructive aspect of the psyche that they refuse to acknowledge. When an empath is awakened, they act as a catalyst. Narcissists, manipulators, and control seekers experience their own shadow reflected back, forcing unacknowledged parts of themselves to emerge, often in uncontrolled, chaotic ways. Consider a metaphor. Picture a mirror held up to a fire. The heat intensifies, sparks fly, and hidden flames reveal themselves. That is the effect of an awakened empath on a manipulative individual. The more they resist being seen, the more their shadow erupts, creating visible instability, confusion, and sometimes self-sabotage. But here's the part nobody talks about. This confrontation of shadow is not inherently destructive. It is corrective. By exposing hidden motives and toxic behaviors, the empath facilitates awareness, even if the narcissist resists or reacts defensively. In Jungian terms, the empath serves as a necessary agent of psychological alchemy, transforming unconscious darkness into conscious insight, whether the subject is willing or not. Wait until you hear this. Step 3 is the strategic restraint of empathy. A truly awakened empath does not act on every insight indiscriminately. They recognize the danger of overexposure, emotional entanglement, or premature disclosure. Jung emphasized the power of timing and selective revelation. By choosing when, where, and how to manifest perception, the empath wields influence without unnecessary risk, ensuring clarity and autonomy remain intact. Consider a story. Jonah sensed that his business partner was manipulating financial reports subtly over months. Rather than confronting immediately, he observed patterns, gathered evidence, and allowed the manipulative behaviors to unfold naturally. When the moment arrived, he addressed the situation decisively, exposing the truth while protecting himself and minimizing collateral emotional damage. His restraint amplified his power. The narcissist was blindsided by a clarity they could not manipulate or avoid. But here's the part nobody talks about. Restraint is also a form of ethical power. Empathy without discernment can become reactive, resulting in unnecessary conflict or emotional entanglement. The awakened empath balances insight with strategy, ensuring influence is exercised consciously and with purpose. Wait until you hear this. Step 4 is the unique threat an awakened empath poses to hierarchical control structures. Narcissists and sociopaths often operate in systems designed to exploit blind obedience or ignorance. The empath disrupts this system simply by seeing and refusing to comply unconsciously. They cannot be coerced into gaslighting themselves, doubting reality, or enabling exploitation. Their presence alone redefines the dynamics of power. Consider a metaphor. A single beam of light shone into a room filled with smoke immediately changes perception. What was previously obscured becomes visible. Manipulation fails. Control is lost. That is the effect of an awakened empath on any system built on deception. But here's the part nobody talks about. This makes the empath a target. Narcissists, control seekers, and manipulators instinctively recognize the threat of exposure. Attempts to discredit, isolate, or provoke the empath are common. Jungian psychology emphasizes that the empath's resilience depends on integrating shadow, reinforcing boundaries, and cultivating energetic immunity. Awareness alone is insufficient. Mastery of self is essential. Wait until you hear this. Step 5 is the transformative potential of awakened empathy. Beyond confrontation or disruption, the empath can catalyze growth, healing, and accountability in others. By holding space for truth without judgment, they enable others to face their shadow, realign behaviors, and in rare cases, transform destructive tendencies into conscious, constructive actions. Consider a story. Nadia, an awakened empath working in a corporate setting dominated by manipulative colleagues, gradually influenced her team through consistent clarity, fairness, and integrity. Her presence exposed hidden motives without direct confrontation, gradually shifting team dynamics toward accountability, transparency, and healthier collaboration. The narcissistic tendencies were challenged not by aggression, but by unwavering awareness and emotional sovereignty. But here's the part nobody talks about. This transformative effect requires self-regulation. The empath cannot absorb the projected darkness and remain effective. Daily practice of energetic boundaries, shadow work, and reflective processing ensures that the empath remains a source of clarity rather than succumbing to psychic erosion. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to sense every hidden motive, every unspoken agenda, as if they are tuned to a frequency nobody else can hear? That's the awakened empath at work. But here's the part nobody talks about. This ability is not supernatural. It is the product of heightened perception, intense emotional attunement, and rigorous shadow work. Jung believed that such awareness, when properly integrated, can make an individual not only impervious to manipulation, but capable of influencing even the most cunning narcissist. Wait until you hear this. The awakened empath is dangerous because they predict patterns before they manifest. Manipulators rely on repetition, on predictable reactions. They exploit blind spots and emotional reflexes. An empath sees these patterns like a map, recognizing where the predator will strike, how the lie will unfold, and what emotional levers are being pulled. This foresight is not just protective, it is transformative, allowing them to navigate toxic landscapes strategically rather than reactively. Consider a story. Mara worked in a corporate environment dominated by a manipulative manager. She quickly realized that every attempt to undermine her confidence followed a precise schedule: flattery on Monday, subtle criticism midweek, and strategic exclusion before meetings. Instead of reacting, she anticipated these moves. She prepared responses, reinforced her self-boundaries, and documented interactions. Within months, her manager's attempts to destabilize her backfired, leaving the narcissist exposed and frustrated. But here's the part nobody talks about. The empath's danger lies not in overt confrontation, but in subtle disruption. They do not need to attack or accuse. Their presence alone destabilizes manipulative dynamics. It's like introducing a counter-frequency that cancels out deception. Manipulation cannot thrive in the presence of someone who perceives it fully. Wait until you hear this. Step 2 is emotional immunity. Empaths are naturally sensitive, but awakening requires mastering one's responses. Jung warned that over-identification with others' emotions can create psychic contamination. The awakened empath develops techniques to feel without absorbing, to witness without internalizing. This emotional immunity allows them to remain grounded while observing, assessing, and influencing complex human dynamics. Consider a metaphor. Think of the empath as a glass prism. They refract light, revealing hidden spectrums, yet remain intact. Toxic energy can swirl around them, but it cannot penetrate unless they allow it. This mastery is what makes them more dangerous than any narcissist imagines. They see the strings and never get tangled in them. But here's the part nobody talks about. Emotional immunity requires daily practice. Even a single lapse, responding impulsively, over-engaging, or ignoring a boundary, can temporarily compromise clarity. Techniques like breath work, journaling, and energy resets are essential to maintain psychic stability and ensure influence remains precise rather than reactive. Wait until you hear this. Step 3 is shadow reflection. Jung believed that every human carries a shadow, the hidden, often destructive aspects of the psyche. The awakened empath naturally triggers these shadows in others. For narcissists, this is particularly destabilizing. Their shadow, often aggressive, envious, or deceitful, surfaces when confronted with clarity. The empath becomes a mirror, reflecting what the narcissist refuses to see in themselves. Consider a story. Leo, an empathic therapist, noticed that clients who were habitual manipulators often became defensive or uncharacteristically vulnerable in his presence. He did not provoke them. He merely maintained awareness, asked subtle questions, and reflected behaviors back without judgment. Over time, these individuals either adjusted their patterns or exposed their manipulative strategies, unable to sustain deceit in the empath's illuminating presence. But here's the part nobody talks about. This reflection is not passive. The empath must be skilled at observing without absorbing. Failure to maintain energetic separation can lead to emotional burnout, cynicism, or even internalization of toxic traits. Mastery is the balance of seeing fully while remaining psychologically intact. Wait until you hear this. Step 4 is strategic influence. Once an empath understands patterns, emotional landscapes, and shadows, they can subtly guide interactions. Jung noted that the most profound influence often occurs without overt force. An empath might plant questions that prompt self-reflection, create situations where the narcissist confronts inconsistencies, or simply hold space that makes manipulation ineffective. Consider a metaphor. Think of chess. Each empathic move is deliberate, measured, and anticipatory. They don't attack recklessly. They create conditions where the manipulator's strategy collapses of its own weight. Influence is exerted without coercion, leaving the narcissist disoriented and powerless. But here's the part nobody talks about. This strategic influence is ethical power. The awakened empath does not seek revenge or domination. Their goal is clarity, accountability, and protection for themselves and others. Jung emphasized that conscious mastery of perception combined with moral integrity is the cornerstone of true psychological power. Wait until you hear this. Step 5 is anticipatory boundary creation. Toxic individuals often escalate when they sense control slipping. The awakened empath preempts this by reinforcing boundaries before conflict arises. These are not passive limits. They are active, visible, and strategically applied. Boundaries are communicated through language, body language, energy, and consistent action. Consider a story. Clara noticed subtle attempts by a coworker to undermine her authority. Rather than confronting every action, she implemented structural safeguards, clarified responsibilities, maintained meticulous records, and established clear communication protocols. When the coworker tried to manipulate a project, Clara's preemptive boundaries neutralized the effort before harm occurred. But here's the part nobody talks about. Anticipatory boundaries are dynamic, not static. Each environment and individual requires calibration. The awakened empath constantly observes, adjusts, and reinforces boundaries to maintain autonomy, clarity, and influence. Wait until you hear this. Step 6 is energy amplification through purpose. An awakened empath channels perception and awareness into focused, meaningful action. Rather than dispersing energy reacting to every disturbance, they align it with creative, strategic, or healing objectives. This alignment magnifies both resilience and influence, making them even more potent in social or professional arenas. Consider a metaphor. Picture a magnifying glass focusing sunlight to ignite a fire. Purpose focus concentrates empathic energy, converting insight into tangible impact. Without alignment, perception remains diffuse, potentially overwhelming rather than empowering, but here's the part nobody talks about. Energy amplification is cumulative. Every act of clarity, ethical influence, and strategic engagement strengthens internal power, creating a feedback loop of confidence, perception, and resilience. Wait until you hear this. In the next part, we'll explore the real-world consequences of awakened empathy, how narcissists and manipulators respond when they finally encounter someone who cannot be deceived, and the life-changing transformations that occur for the empath who masters their awareness and energy. Have you ever noticed that when a narcissist encounters someone who refuses to be manipulated, their behavior escalates unpredictably? It's as if the world has betrayed their understanding of control. Wait until you hear this. An awakened empath is more than a threat. They are a destabilizing force in systems built on deception, entitlement, and emotional exploitation. But here's the part nobody talks about. The danger lies not in confrontation, but in the empath's ability to neutralize manipulation silently, consistently, and invisibly. Consider the concept of emotional clairvoyance. An awakened empath doesn't merely detect surface-level deceit. They sense the intentions behind actions, the unspoken strategies of control, and the subtle cues that reveal unconscious desires. Carl Jung described this as perceiving the shadow motives of others, a skill that, when refined, renders traditional manipulation ineffective. Imagine a story. Sophia worked closely with a partner who subtly sabotaged projects to elevate themselves. Initially, she noticed small inconsistencies, fleeting expressions of guilt, and micro-shifts in behavior that suggested dishonesty. Rather than confronting immediately, she observed and cataloged these patterns. When the time came, her awareness allowed her to expose the manipulations clearly, protect her own position, and maintain ethical integrity. The narcissist was blindsided. Their strategy unraveled without any dramatic confrontation. But here's the part nobody talks about. The awakened empath often triggers unconscious self-destruction in manipulators. Narcissists depend on blind spots, gaps in perception they can exploit. The empath illuminates these gaps, forcing the narcissist's own shadow to surface. Guilt, envy, impulsivity, and rage become visible, often leading to errors, exposure, or relational collapse. The empath does not have to act aggressively. Their awareness alone is transformative. Wait until you hear this. The second principle at work here is psychic containment. Unlike untrained empaths who absorb energy indiscriminately, the awakened empath contains and channels the emotional intensity they encounter. Jung warned that excessive absorption of others' energy could lead to psychic contamination, anxiety, and loss of clarity. The awakened empath avoids this by creating a mental and emotional container, a protective boundary that allows them to observe without internalizing. Consider a metaphor. Imagine a crystal clear river flowing through a toxic swamp. The water does not become murky. It flows cleanly, observing the environment, shaping its course without contamination. That is the energetic mastery an awakened empath achieves. They move through the world perceiving darkness but remain untainted. But here's the part nobody talks about. Psychic containment is not passive. It requires active vigilance and discipline. Boundaries must be constantly reinforced, emotional resets practiced, and shadow integration maintained. Otherwise, even the most perceptive empath risks being overwhelmed by the very toxicity they aim to navigate. Wait until you hear this. Step 3 is mirror influence. The awakened empath acts as a mirror, reflecting back the unconscious dynamics of others. Jung suggested that confrontation with one's shadow often triggers growth or breakdown. For narcissists, this reflection is threatening because it exposes patterns they rely on for control. Empaths catalyze awareness not through accusation, but through presence, observation, and subtle feedback. Consider a story. David, an empathic manager, noticed a team member consistently undermining colleagues to gain recognition. Rather than reacting with confrontation or punishment, David maintained calm, consistently reinforced boundaries, and highlighted behaviors transparently in meetings. The team member eventually exposed their own manipulative strategies, facing consequences without David ever needing to escalate. But here's the part nobody talks about. Mirror influence also requires moral restraint. The empath must resist the temptation to exploit insight for revenge or power. Jung emphasized that ethical use of awareness is central to individuation. True mastery lies in guiding, protecting, and transforming interactions, not in satisfying egoic impulses. Wait until you hear this. Step 4 is anticipatory disengagement. Awakened empaths know when to engage and when to step back. Some narcissists escalate unpredictably, and engagement without strategy can be dangerous. The empath reads energy patterns and creates distance strategically, ensuring they are not drawn into reactive cycles or emotional traps. Consider a metaphor. Think of a skilled predator observing prey from a distance. They do not attack immediately. They assess, time, and choose the optimal moment to act or disengage. The awakened empath applies the same principle to human interaction. Aware, present, but never blindly exposed. But here's the part nobody talks about. Disengagement is not avoidance. It is strategic preservation. By maintaining distance, the empath protects energy, maintains clarity, and ensures that future influence remains possible without unnecessary exposure to harm. Wait until you hear this. Step 5 is resilience through integration. An awakened empath processes experiences deeply, converting exposure to toxicity into psychological insight. Jung highlighted shadow integration as essential for personal empowerment. By confronting and understanding their own vulnerabilities, the empath strengthens their capacity to remain stable, influential, and perceptive in the face of manipulation. Consider a story. Layla, after years of navigating manipulative relationships, used journaling and reflective practice to integrate past wounds. When a former manipulative partner re-entered her life unexpectedly, she responded with calm observation, set firm boundaries, and acted with strategic precision. The encounter left the narcissist off balance while Layla's autonomy remained intact. But here's the part nobody talks about. Integration is ongoing. Each exposure to deception, control, or emotional manipulation presents an opportunity to refine awareness, strengthen boundaries, and deepen self-mastery. The awakened empath evolves continuously, becoming increasingly impervious to exploitation. Wait until you hear this. Step 6 is transformation through influence. Beyond defense, awakened empaths can reshape the emotional and social environments they inhabit. By acting from clarity, ethical insight, and energetic mastery, they catalyze accountability, transparency, and self-awareness in others, often without confrontation. Narcissists and manipulators are forced to adapt, retreat, or reveal their tactics under the empath's unyielding observation. Consider a metaphor. Imagine a lighthouse in a storm. Ships that once navigated blindly, crashing into hidden rocks, now adjust course to safety. The empath's awareness illuminates the hidden terrain of human behavior, guiding interactions toward clarity, integrity, and growth. But here's the part nobody talks about. Transformation requires discipline, shadow work, and consistent energetic maintenance. Without these, influence can be inconsistent, reactive, or emotionally costly. The awakened empath's power is proportional to the depth of their self-mastery and ethical alignment. Wait until you hear this. In the next part, we'll examine the specific ways narcissists and manipulative individuals react to awakened empaths, the psychological chaos they generate, and the step-by-step strategies empaths use to maintain sovereignty while transforming relational dynamics permanently. Have you ever witnessed someone unravel when confronted by truth they cannot manipulate? That's exactly what happens when a narcissist faces an awakened empath. But here's the part nobody talks about. It's not just about seeing through lies. It's about the empath's ability to destabilize control structures without saying a word. The very presence of clarity, awareness, and emotional sovereignty can provoke fear, confusion, and desperate attempts to regain power. Wait until you hear this. Narcissists rely on predictability. They exploit reflexive reactions, emotional blind spots, and habitual compliance. An awakened empath defies all of this. Every attempt at manipulation, every hidden agenda is anticipated, observed, and neutralized. This creates a psychological feedback loop that is both terrifying and transformative. Consider a story. Helena, an awakened empath, worked under a manager who thrived on intimidation. Initially, subtle threats, guilt-tripping, and exclusion tactics were used to control her. But Helena's awareness of the underlying strategies allowed her to remain calm, respond selectively, and anticipate future manipulations. Within weeks, the manager's usual tactics failed repeatedly, exposing weaknesses the team had never noticed before. And the narcissist became visibly disoriented, struggling to maintain the illusion of authority. But here's the part nobody talks about. Narcissists often react with escalation first, then withdrawal. When their control fails, they may attempt more aggressive manipulation, create chaos, or provoke emotional responses. If this fails, they retreat, often nursing resentment or attempting to regain influence indirectly. The empath, however, is prepared for both reactions, remaining emotionally grounded and strategically responsive. Wait until you hear this. Step 2 is calibrated confrontation. An awakened empath does not need to confront every action immediately. Timing is critical. Jung emphasized the importance of allowing unconscious motives to reveal themselves naturally. By observing patterns, the empath chooses the moment to act, when exposure will have maximum impact, when manipulation can no longer hide behind confusion, and when clarity can be maintained without collateral damage. Consider a story. Tomas, an empathic consultant, noticed a coworker subtly undermining his proposals in meetings. Rather than confronting impulsively, he waited, documented interactions, and allowed the pattern to continue just long enough to gather irrefutable evidence. When he finally addressed the behavior, the manipulator was completely blindsided. The confrontation was calm, precise, and unavoidable. Their deceit was fully exposed without aggression. But here's the part nobody talks about. This is not just defense. It is strategic influence. The empath reshapes dynamics while maintaining integrity. The manipulator's attempts to control are neutralized, but the empath retains autonomy, energy, and focus. Every interaction becomes an opportunity for clarity, accountability, and transformation. Wait until you hear this. Step 3 is emotional foresight. The awakened empath senses the triggers narcissists use: subtle flattery, guilt, or emotional pressure before they are deployed. By anticipating these moves, the empath prevents emotional entanglement, remains calm, and chooses responses that maintain psychological advantage. This foresight creates a form of invisible power that manipulative individuals cannot counter. Consider a metaphor. Picture a chess player anticipating every possible move of their opponent several turns ahead. Each strategy is countered before it is fully formed, leaving the opponent disoriented. That is the empath's advantage: anticipation, clarity, and strategic foresight. But here's the part nobody talks about. Emotional foresight requires energetic discipline. The empath must constantly monitor their own emotional state, remaining untangled from projected manipulations. Techniques like grounding, breathwork, and reflective processing are critical for maintaining this heightened awareness over time. Wait until you hear this. Step 4 is shadow confrontation in real time. Narcissists have unacknowledged shadows, hidden desires, insecurities, and impulses that drive their behavior. The awakened empath reflects these shadows without judgment, often unintentionally triggering self-awareness or defensive chaos. This is why narcissists sometimes react unpredictably, projecting rage or envy onto the empath. Consider a story. Olivia, an awakened empath, noticed subtle envy in a coworker who regularly claimed credit for team successes. By calmly acknowledging contributions and maintaining transparency in meetings, Olivia forced the coworker's shadow to surface. Jealousy, deceit, and frustration became visible to everyone. The manipulative behavior collapsed under scrutiny, while Olivia remained composed and unaffected. But here's the part nobody talks about. Shadow confrontation is a double-edged sword. While it exposes deception and catalyzes accountability, it can provoke temporary hostility. The empath must balance presence and restraint, knowing when to observe, when to intervene, and when to allow the individual to face their own reflection. Wait until you hear this. Step 5 is resilience through autonomy. Narcissists often attempt to destabilize empaths by creating dependence, confusion, or guilt. The awakened empath maintains independence, emotionally, psychologically, and energetically. Boundaries are not negotiable. Clarity is non-negotiable. This autonomy is the foundation of their power, ensuring that manipulation cannot succeed even when the narcissist escalates. Tactics. Consider a metaphor. Imagine a lighthouse standing steadfast during a storm. Waves crash, winds howl, but the structure is immovable. The light shines consistently, revealing hidden dangers and guiding others safely. The empath, like the lighthouse, remains anchored in awareness, illuminating truth without being swept away. But here's the part nobody talks about. Autonomy requires ongoing self-work. Grounding, shadow integration, and emotional management are daily practices. Each encounter with a manipulative individual presents an opportunity to refine boundaries, strengthen awareness, and reinforce inner power. Wait until you hear this. Step 6 is transformative influence. Beyond protection and disruption, awakened empaths can reshape dynamics constructively. They influence environments, relationships, and organizations not by domination, but through clarity, transparency, and ethical guidance. Narcissists are challenged to adapt, retreat, or reveal truth because the empath's presence leaves no room for deception. Consider a story. Daniel, an empathic team leader, gradually restructured a department dominated by manipulative colleagues. Without confrontation or public shaming, he maintained transparency, reinforced ethical behaviors, and set unshakable boundaries. Within months, manipulative behaviors diminished, accountability increased, and team morale improved. The narcissists were forced to change or disengage, entirely reshaped by the empath's calm, consistent influence. But here's the part nobody talks about. Transformation is long-term and cumulative. Every interaction, every boundary maintained, every subtle influence strengthens the empath's presence, expands their power, and increases their capacity to navigate increasingly complex psychological landscapes. Wait until you hear this. In the next part, we'll explore the final stage of awakening, when the empath's power reaches its full potential, influencing not only manipulators but reshaping entire relational, professional, and social environments while maintaining personal sovereignty and inner peace. Have you ever wondered what happens when an empath stops merely surviving and begins to truly thrive in a world dominated by manipulation, deceit, and hidden agendas? Wait until you hear this. The awakening of an empath is not just personal, it is systemic. Their presence begins to shift dynamics in workplaces, families, and social networks, creating ripples that narcissists and manipulators cannot anticipate or control. But here's the part nobody talks about. The most dangerous aspect of an awakened empath is their ability to reshape relational ecosystems without force, intimidation, or aggression. Step 1 of this final awakening is energetic sovereignty. The empath no longer reacts emotionally to manipulative tactics. Every attempt to provoke, guilt, or confuse is met with calm observation and strategic response. Jung referred to this as individuation, the process of fully integrating conscious awareness with unconscious insight. The empath has moved from reflexive empathy to conscious empathy, seeing clearly while remaining untangled. Consider a story. Amira, after years of navigating toxic family dynamics, developed the ability to maintain composure during heated interactions. When her manipulative sibling attempted to guilt-trip her during a family gathering, she remained grounded, observed the behavior, and responded with clarity and calm boundaries. The sibling's manipulation collapsed instantly. Without the empath's reactive energy, the tactics had no effect. But here's the part nobody talks about. Energetic sovereignty is not natural for most empaths. It is cultivated through consistent shadow work, emotional management, and disciplined observation. Every failure to maintain boundaries strengthens the need for vigilance. Every success reinforces inner power, and every reflection deepens perception. Wait until you hear this. Step 2 is strategic relational influence. The awakened empath now directs interactions subtly, guiding outcomes without confrontation. Manipulative individuals are forced to adjust or reveal their patterns under scrutiny. This is where the empath becomes dangerous in the eyes of narcissists, not because they attack, but because they cannot be manipulated or deceived, effectively dismantling the narcissist's control matrix. Consider a metaphor. Picture a conductor leading an orchestra. Every instrument, individual, has its own tendencies and potential discord, yet the conductor harmonizes them, maintaining order, rhythm, and purpose. The awakened empath orchestrates social dynamics with subtlety, transforming chaos into coherence. But here's the part nobody talks about. This influence is ethical. Jung warned against using awareness for domination or personal gain. The empath's power is proportional to moral alignment, intentionality, and focus on constructive outcomes. Manipulators may fear them, but the empath is not motivated by revenge. They are motivated by clarity, justice, and self-sovereignty. Wait until you hear this. Step 3 is anticipatory mastery of human behavior. The empath sees not only patterns of manipulation, but also opportunities for growth. Every attempt at control by others becomes an opportunity for reflection, learning, and subtle redirection. This predictive capacity is like having a psychological GPS, mapping intentions, vulnerabilities, and likely outcomes before events unfold. Consider a story. Ezra, an empathic teacher, noticed students vying for attention through passive-aggressive tactics. By anticipating these behaviors, he structured class interactions to minimize manipulation, guide accountability, and encourage authentic expression. The manipulative behaviors diminished naturally, while student autonomy and collaboration flourished. But here's the part nobody talks about. Anticipatory mastery requires continuous observation and ethical calibration. The empath must distinguish between insight and intrusion, influence and manipulation, guidance and control. The danger lies not in the empath's awareness, but in potential misuse. Jung emphasized that power without self-awareness is destructive, even for the most perceptive individuals. Wait until you hear this. Step 4 is resonance amplification. An awakened empath no longer absorbs energy aimlessly. They intentionally amplify positive or constructive energies around them. This has a ripple effect. Manipulators find their attempts blocked, collaborators feel supported, and overall systems become healthier and more transparent. Consider a metaphor. Imagine sunlight reflecting off a prism, spreading light into every shadowed corner of a room. The empath does not attack the darkness, they illuminate it indirectly, allowing clarity and growth to emerge naturally. But here's the part nobody talks about. Resonance amplification is deliberate and disciplined. The empath selects where to invest attention, energy, and emotional bandwidth. Not every battle deserves engagement, and not every interaction requires influence. Strategic focus magnifies effectiveness while preserving psychic integrity. Wait until you hear this. Step 5 is shadow mastery in others. At this stage, the empath catalyzes shadow recognition in narcissists, manipulators, and even well-intentioned but unaware individuals. By reflecting unacknowledged motives, they force introspection and accountability. This is why manipulators often perceive awakened empaths as threatening. They expose truths the ego cannot face. Consider a story. Nina, an empathic leader, observed a team member's consistent avoidance of responsibility. Without confrontation, she highlighted processes and outcomes transparently, forcing the individual to confront their patterns. The manipulative strategies fell apart naturally, and the person either adapted or disengaged, unable to continue unchecked deception. But here's the part nobody talks about. Shadow mastery is not domination. It is clarity applied ethically. The empath's purpose is not to punish, but to illuminate patterns, reveal truth, and maintain integrity in every interaction. Wait until you hear this. Step 6 is transformational autonomy. By this stage, the empath operates from full self-sovereignty. Manipulators may try to provoke or control, but the empath remains unshaken, guiding outcomes through observation, influence, and ethical intervention. This level of mastery makes them extraordinarily dangerous to those who rely on deception, yet profoundly impactful for those seeking clarity and truth. Consider a metaphor. A seasoned gardener tends to wild and overgrown plants. They prune strategically, provide structure, and guide growth, allowing each plant to flourish without forcing compliance. The empath shapes relational dynamics similarly, subtle, deliberate, and profoundly transformative. But here's the part nobody talks about. Transformational autonomy requires continuous self-work, ethical alignment, and energy management. Mastery is never complete. It evolves alongside every new encounter, relationship, and system. The awakened empath's power is cumulative, expanding with clarity, insight, and presence over time. Have you ever realized the true scale of influence an awakened empath can have? Wait until you hear this. It goes far beyond personal interactions. Once an empath reaches full mastery over boundaries, shadow integration, and anticipatory awareness, they begin to reshape entire systems, communities, and networks. But here's the part nobody talks about. Their power is subtle, invisible, and profoundly destabilizing to those who thrive on manipulation. Step 1 of systemic influence is energetic leadership. The awakened empath does not command in a traditional sense. They lead through presence, clarity, and resonance. People unconsciously align with their stability and ethical consistency. Narcissists, manipulators, and passive-aggressive individuals feel their control eroding, often without realizing why. This is Jung's principle of the collective unconscious. In action, the empath impacts group energy by influencing collective patterns subtly yet irrevocably. Consider a story. Maya, a community organizer, noticed entrenched gossip, manipulation, and competition draining her neighborhood's cohesion. By consistently modeling integrity, maintaining calm boundaries, and guiding discussions ethically, she gradually transformed the social climate. Conflicts diminished, accountability increased, and collaborative initiatives flourished. Manipulative behaviors didn't vanish immediately, but they were systematically neutralized. But here's the part nobody talks about. The empath's influence works without force or overt confrontation. They cannot be detected by those who rely on deception until the effect is undeniable. A narcissist may attempt to regain control, but the empath's consistent clarity renders manipulation ineffective. Their presence becomes a stabilizing force that reshapes interactions naturally. Wait until you hear this. Step 2 is cultural recalibration. The awakened empath introduces new behavioral norms through subtle reflection and mirroring. When people encounter accountability, ethical integrity, and emotional clarity repeatedly, they unconsciously adjust their own behavior to match. Jung described this as individuation influencing the collective personal mastery, catalyzing broader transformation. Consider a metaphor. Imagine a ripple spreading across a still pond. The initial disturbance is small, but the waves eventually reach every corner. Similarly, the empath's consistent energy radiates through social systems, gradually transforming collective behavior without force or coercion. But here's the part nobody talks about. Narcissists and manipulators perceive this influence as a threat, often escalating attempts to regain dominance. They may create chaos, provoke emotional reactions, or attempt to manipulate the system in response. The awakened empath anticipates these tactics, neutralizing disruption with calm presence, transparent communication, and strategic boundaries. Wait until you hear this. Step 3 is strategic environmental shaping. The empath begins to design their surroundings to reduce exposure to toxicity and amplify clarity. Workflows, social interactions, and communication patterns are subtly optimized to encourage transparency, accountability, and ethical alignment. This environmental shaping prevents manipulators from gaining traction, creating a feedback loop where integrity is naturally reinforced. Consider a story. Leo, an empathic CEO, inherited a company rife with internal competition, secretive power plays, and manipulative employees. By restructuring teams, clarifying accountability, and modeling ethical behavior, he created an environment where manipulative strategies failed without direct confrontation. Employees adjusted, collaboration improved, and the toxic culture slowly dissolved. But here's the part nobody talks about. Environmental shaping requires disciplined energy management. The empath must continually monitor both their own state and the system's energy. Overextension risks vulnerability to manipulation or emotional contamination. Jung emphasized that awareness without boundaries can become destructive, even for the most perceptive individuals. Wait until you hear this. Step 4 is collective shadow activation. When a system has long-standing dysfunction, narcissists and manipulators often operate unconsciously, projecting unresolved shadow traits onto others. The awakened empath reflects these patterns subtly, forcing recognition and accountability. Chaos may ensue temporarily, but this is the crucible for transformation. Consider a story. Isabella, a school counselor, noticed recurring conflicts between teachers and administration fueled by unacknowledged resentments. Through careful observation, ethical intervention, and subtle mirroring of behaviors, she encouraged reflection and acknowledgement. Initially, tension spiked, but eventually, unresolved issues were addressed, fostering a healthier educational environment. But here's the part nobody talks about. The empath's mirror does not provoke for entertainment or ego. It activates latent awareness. Individuals confronted with their shadow can either adapt or resist. Manipulators often resist initially, but repeated exposure to clarity forces adjustment or retreat. Wait until you hear this. Step 5 is resilient influence under attack. As manipulators escalate, the empath maintains sovereignty. They do not absorb toxic energy. They redirect, observe, and strategically respond. Emotional provocation, gossip campaigns, and covert sabotage are neutralized because the empath no longer engages on reactive terms. Their calm, grounded presence becomes the axis around which chaos rotates and eventually dissipates. Consider a metaphor. Picture a tree standing in the middle of a storm. Winds howl, branches lash, yet the trunk remains unshaken. The roots dig deeper, drawing strength from the earth. Similarly, the awakened empath withstands assaults, emerging stronger and increasingly influential in the system. But here's the part nobody talks about. Resilience is not static. Each engagement with manipulation is an opportunity to refine boundaries, enhance perception, and deepen shadow integration. Jung emphasized that growth occurs through challenge, not comfort. The empath evolves continuously, their influence compounding over time. Wait until you hear this. Step 6 is transformational legacy. The awakened empath ultimately reshapes social systems, relationships, and professional environments while maintaining personal integrity and inner peace. Narcissists and manipulators are forced to either adapt ethically or disengage entirely. The empath's energy becomes the foundation for long-term clarity, accountability, and healthy relational structures. Consider a story. Serena, after years of leading social initiatives, noticed her community becoming increasingly collaborative, transparent, and ethically aligned. Toxic influencers either adjusted behaviors or moved away. Serena's subtle, consistent interventions had transformed the environment without overt force, leaving a sustainable system of integrity. But here's the part nobody talks about. Systemic transformation requires discipline, shadow integration, and constant ethical awareness. The empath's mastery is cumulative, growing with every interaction, every boundary maintained, and every subtle influence applied thoughtfully.